you could describe this book as behavioral design, but I think we would all just be like, oh, really? What? I mean, I couldn't imagine a less appropriate way of, even though it is behavioral design, and that is fundamentally the framework. For me, it's more about being human. It's not about the extravagant show off moments of our lives, and it's not about necessarily big achievements, although it can be. But it really just gives you a framework for creating meaningful experiences, whether that's in your everyday life. I mean, it does literally apply to everyone. You can apply this to your personal life for the better, for your career, or if you're building products or companies. I think it's absolutely fundamental. And it's fundamentally also really empathetic. And I was struggling to kind of put it into a succinct way, but it feels like when you're reading this book, it feels like you're going to the pub with a really enthusiastic, well-informed friend that you haven't seen for years, and they've got these amazing stories that they tell you. And it makes you think, oh, of course, because a lot of it is kind of common sense, but it's joyful and it's the best kind of thinking. So that brings us on to thing one. And it's essentially, timey-wimey, wibbly wobbly. Life is remembered in moments, and it's not a linear timeline. We all act as if, our week, and arguably our week is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and that builds up into the weeks of our lives. But actually, when you look back on your life, you remember it in moments. And their argument is that, there are moments, three kinds of moments that are the obvious ones to celebrate. Now, that's transitions, whether that's like old job to new job, or milestones. You've turned 40, you've turned 50, you've got married. And then there's the pits of life as well, which are sort of poor experiences or hard experiences for you. And I guess what they're saying is you won't remember a random Tuesday 2 weeks ago, but you can remember the standout moments. And it's not just the big showy moments. It's not just the moments that are put upon you, like, you can't avoid turning 30, 40, 50. I'm going for that as being our demographic today. But you can be intentional about the milestones that you create. And I suppose, I think about this a lot with 20 Photos, which is my company, because really we are about curating these little moments that, it's not just the big standout moments that we need to remember. It is those everyday moments and celebrating those as well. So I think we all have a lot of room to improve on that. And that's why this book is so useful, which brings us on to thing two. And I just love this quote: beware the soul-sucking force of reasonableness. It's really about the tension between, efficiency, which has its place, absolutely has its place. We don't want friction the whole time. But often friction is the antithesis to meaning. And meaningful moments often they're never somebody's job. And they often require extra effort and time and going out of your way and doing something that's probably, just a little bit silly. They talk about, a lovely example is the Magic Castle Hotel in LA. It's a very average kind of 3-star hotel in many ways, but by the pool, there is a phone, and you can pick up the phone, and that phone is always manned. And it's the popsicle hotline. And within 3 minutes, Once you call that, once you pick up that phone, they bring an ice lolly on a silver tray with white gloves to the poolside. There's no charge for it. Now, that is a moment of absolute delight. You know, people would talk about that. I'm talking about it now. But the reasonable version of that would be having a freezer by the pool that people could help themselves to the popsicles. Going very American with popsicles. So that's much more efficient. You're not staffing a phone. You're not going out and spending the time. But basically, reasonableness flattens our peaks. They flatten the moments of joy. So basically, you have to go out of your way, which brings us on to thing 3. And this is my only very sensible slide, which I really liked in this book, how it gives you the framework for what's inside meaningful moments. You know, and I guess fundamentally it does feel like that friend in the pub, because they joke about, you know, they're like, okay, yes, these words, this can be remembered by epic, but it sounds like, once you hear that, it sounds like a sort of stone surfer dude, I think are their words. And they say they won't mention it again, but obviously I now have. But essentially giving us a framework for these different meaningful moments, because meaningful moments aren't just about, you know, joy and whoop, whoop, big celebration. They're really about kind of also connection with people, understanding how we can stretch ourselves and grow. Pride, I guess, is celebrating those things that you've worked really hard for, but also elevating everyday moments as well. So it's just a way to look at any experience that you want to make into something memorable and be able to ask what's missing. So thing 4, milestones drive behavior. So this is a graph of marathon times. And what you'll see here is with these lines are not artificially are not imposed on it. That is actually just the density of runners finishing at that specific time. And now there's no fundamental human reason that we finish a marathon sort of on the half hour. It's actually that milestones create urgency and they push us to stretch. There's no real performance difference between 3 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds and 4 hours, but you'll see that there's a massive concentration at that time. And then there's a drop off after that. And that's because you stretch yourself to get there so that you have those bragging rights. And so then I suppose this is just an example of how they talk through these different things. You know, the normal way in our everyday life that we would create milestones. For example, you want to learn Spanish. So the way we would think about that is like, well, I need to practice Spanish every day. You know, so you would do that as level 1, do a lesson. Level 2, do another Spanish lesson. Level 3, do another Spanish lesson. And you have this vague and distant goal of, oh, I'm going to achieve proficiency in Spanish someday, never. But another version might be level 1, learn how to order a meal in Spanish. And level 2 would be, and I guess maybe not so much in Scotland, but speak to a taxi driver in Spanish. This is probably more applicable to actually Martin. Level 3, read a headline in Spanish and understand it. And I guess fundamentally, it's like about creating milestones for yourself with just a little bit of thought, makes them tangible and motivating. And yeah, and meaningful as well. And you can do that really with any task or any big thing that you want. And I guess fundamentally, it's then making that final milestone something as well that is like, oh, okay, yes, it's not achieving proficiency in Spanish. It's being able to have a conversation with your colleague who is Spanish. And so that you can also know when you've done that. I mean, yes, do a lesson in Spanish is, yes, it's a tick off, but which is more satisfying, I guess, is their point. And coming on to thing 5, connection doesn't come from time. I think this was a sort of almost a small point at the end, but it did hit me, and I guess it really comes back to, I guess, what I think about a lot in terms of the role of photos, but also just about our connection and how we spend our time. So again, it's patently obvious when you start to think about it, but knowing someone for years doesn't mean you really know them. One of your sort of, I'm trying to think within my family, knowing my uncle and having small talk with him at Christmas time over the course of 10 years doesn't mean we're ever going to get to know each other better. However, when you make an effort to deepen a relationship through meaningful interaction, whether that's creating moments or actually also, I suppose it comes into maybe you guys all live in the same sort of podcast world that I live in, but about having meaningful conversations and asking questions that go beyond your average small talk, asking better questions and really finding out what matters to the person you're speaking to. That is a way of deepening. And they go into the point of, I'm pretty sure we've all heard about it, where, in 45 minutes, you can develop an intimate, like a deeply intellectually intimate relationship with people by asking through a series of questions. And really, I mean, maybe we can all take that into our lives. So actually, I have a challenge for all of us, and it's a challenge from the book. And the concept is called the Saturday Surprise. And it's really about how you break the script of your Saturday. Now, Saturday is tomorrow, guys. So it's like everybody has probably a fairly usual routine of their weekend, but it is like, how could you make that Saturday memorable? And it's not about spending money, and it's not about necessarily doing grandiose things. It might be, having a living room picnic with your partner instead of sitting at the dining room table or watching Gladiators if you've got small, medium-sized children. It's maybe letting your child plan the day, unless they're toddlers, like a few of the people in the room. Not that we've got toddlers in the room, parents of toddlers. It might be going to that place that you've always meant to go. The point is, I guess, it's like spending small effort to make a big memory. And don't be reasonable, because it would be reasonable just to stick to your Saturday routine. But actually, don't be reasonable. So my final closing is, this quote really struck me, is that we walk a flat land that could have been a mountain range, and really about like, don't make all your days the same, and don't make all your connections the same, and really like finding ways to celebrate. I've made this really about our personal day-to-day life. It can all be applied to business, and they've got really, really compelling cases. But life can be flat and repetitive, or it can be filled with peaks. And one of the things I think about a lot at the moment is, when reflecting on how I am living my life, is the regrets of the dying. And I'm sure probably most of us have heard about it, but there was this hospice nurse, and she had all these conversations, and she collated it into, these are the regrets, that most people after 25 years of working with people who are dying. These are their regrets: not living true to yourself, working too much, not expressing your feelings to the people that you love, losing touch with people and not allowing happiness within your life. And I suppose that really ties back to these moments and these connections within the book. Courage, having courage, living intentionally, building connection, and breaking the script on the everyday. So on the surface, I think basically, obviously, I'm going to say you should go and read this book. And I've tried to not spoil any of the stories for you, except for a couple. It's an incredibly enjoyable story-led book, but on a deeper level, there are so many ways that you can come back to it, and just on so many levels but ultimately it all requires action. So I would really love it if you are all beware of reasonableness, at least for 48 hours, and have a think about what your Saturday surprise will be. And I would be absolutely delighted to receive a message to know what yours has been. And I will have a think. I need to have a think about what mine's going to be. I've got a few ideas. And yeah, let's reconvene on Sunday and tell me what yours was. Thank you so much.
That was amazing, Joe. Thanks so much.